It depends a little on how old the teenager is. It depends on who I am as a parent. If it was my teenager, and I did have two absolutely incredible teenagers for a long time, three, including a stepdaughter, I would really, from where I'm now, I would emphasize that their worth is intrinsic, that they have absolutely nothing to prove, that it isn't their job to make me happy, that it isn't their job to keep their mommy and daddy together, that it isn't their job to maintain the peace in the family, and that it is their only job to fall in love with the self. And then the way to teach that, of course, there's only one way of teaching that, is by demonstrating it. So if I demonstrate to my kids constantly, this is what I'm feeling something right now, and it has nothing to do. I'll tell you a little story. About 9-10 years ago, I was working with a couple that were in a lot of trouble. They believed they hated each other, they believed they wanted a divorce, they believed that the marriage was over. And in 1 or 2 sessions, that started turning around really quickly. And the third session, they brought their, I think there were 4 and 5-year-old boys. Well, the 4 and 5-year-old boys were little hellions. They were wild and sort of out of control and noisy. And I didn't think anybody was getting much out of the session. But they went home, and the father at that time had learned to recognize that meditation is the most important method to use in order to be truly at peace. So one evening the father was meditating, beautifully, peacefully meditating, and the 4-year-old, who had a little funny streak, blew up a paper bag and went like that right next to the daddy's head. And the daddy exploded and sent the kid to the room. And the next morning the kid comes down, 4 years old, 1 session, and says, "Dad, when you were upset last night, that wasn't really about me, was it?" Now that is raising children. That is raising children to not take responsibility for how somebody else feels. Now, of course, the next step is also for the child to look at why did he need to blow up that balloon or that paper bag. What was he looking for? He was looking for a punishment. He was looking for reactions from his father, which was consistent with the belief he already had about himself. That has to be done too. This work does not mean we condone behavior. So if I'm meditating and you want to make a loud noise next to my ear and get a shock out of me, you're going to have to take ownership of that. I'll take ownership of my reaction. But you're also going to have to look at what was your intention? What were you thinking of? Why did it bother you that your father was so peaceful? What came up for you when you saw that? Etc. So it's always a two-way street. But the one-way street is the ownership. So each of us has to take entire ownership of our relationship.
So in that instance, any type of big conflict or whatever comes on with regard to, an argument with a teenage child or anything in that regard, so immediately you would say to pause and then what?
Take it back. First of all, a little word of advice to those of you who have teenage children: don't get into a fight with a teenager. You can't win. They simply, their brain capacity is not like yours. They cannot follow a logical argument, so don't ever do that. That's a losing proposition. But what you do is you talk about how you feel. So I'm in a perceived conflict with my teenager. I'm going to say, this is what I'm feeling. This is what's coming up for me. What's coming up for me is that I must have been a terrible father. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. I must have failed you miserably. I must have failed your mother as well and the other kids. In other words, I am looking at my own failure. Is it true that I failed? No, it's not. It's not. So I cannot enter into a discussion with my teenager as long as I am not at peace. So my first job is to be at peace. My first job is to go back and say, what am I believing about me right now in this situation? And if I do that honestly, my child will respond, because it will simply recognize, I'm not talking about him or her. I'm not accusing him. I'm not holding him or her responsible for how I'm feeling, which is how normally people behave. One of the most damaging things we can say to our little kids is, "You make me so happy." That is an absolute lethal statement. Why? It sounds loving. "You make me so happy." That's fantastic, provided I'm happy 100% of the time. Because what happens when I'm not happy 100% of the time? What happens when I've had a really lousy day at work when I come home? The kid who's used to hearing "you make me so happy" now sees that I'm not happy. Where did that come from? The kid will take that on. Say, if I can make you happy, I also have the power to make you unhappy. Can you imagine what a burden that is on kids? And so often when we work with young adults, teenagers or older, even older adults, one of the most traumatic experiences in the child's life is a divorce. Why is that? Because the child or the person takes on full responsibility for the divorce. It is their fault that their mom and dad were fighting. It's their fault that they were not happy.
Is that almost universal?
That's universal. It's universal. So,
Any divorce?
Any divorce. So unless there is proper divorce counseling, which is an essential branch of counseling, it has to start taking place much more, because people are not going to stay together. It just become a complete clear fact. People don't stay together. So the counseling that I think should be more and more prevalent is counseling that helps people to lovingly leave each other, and to have the whole family recognize that this is a growth pattern. It's not a failure. Nothing is going wrong. But we're so in the habit of saying, "I have a failed marriage." I don't know what a failed marriage is. There's no such a thing as a failed marriage. Failed marriage is an interpretation of a relationship event that my ego does not approve of. That's a failed marriage. There's no such a thing as a failed marriage. So to go back to the original question, how would I work with my teenage child? Number one, teach it or him or her that her worth is established intrinsically. It cannot be changed. Her worth does not increase by getting great grades. Her worth does not decrease by smoking pot or doing stupid stuff. And then the second step is for me to be at peace whenever I address my child. If I address my child not at peace, it's not going to work. He or she is not going to listen. Because he or she immediately knows this is a guilt trip. And what do we do with a guilt trip? How do I feel when somebody lays a guilt trip on me? Well, if it sticks, I need to look at it, but basically I don't enjoy it. Kids don't either. Kids don't like to hear you all the time. Kids absolutely love to hear, "This is what's going on for me." And the families that use that, and particularly over dinner, where we have to get away from the TV and actually sit at the table. Remember the old days 50 years ago when people sat at tables to eat dinner? We have to go back to that. And during dinner we can do a gratitude, and during dinner we can talk about what came up for me during the day. How did I feel? My secretary made a sloppy mistake and it cost me an account. What does that feel? How does that feel? The kids will be listening. They'll be riveted by that. Because that is parenting. Parenting means teaching to take full responsibility and teaching that nothing ever goes wrong, but that everything is a healing and learning opportunity. That's an exciting family.